I agree with you because I think even that's one of the things that why I like to study like ancient methods of music or just ancient cultures. I've always been like an anthropologist. Like that's the thing. Like I'm almost pivoting back into like studying anthropology. I've always been interested in a lot of things, and music is where my heart is the most. But all of these things I research, I feel like that goes into my music. And I've recently gotten back into studying ancient cultures, and they didn't see music as entertainment. I mean, music was so much more powerful and important than that. And for every person, every single person, music was in their life. And I would say that that is true when people are listening to music. That is, still showing that many people understand the value of music. I mean, a lot of people, very few people do you find in life that are like, I don't really care about music, but they're out there. They're out there and they're just like, nah, just indifferent to it, or maybe even don't like it. But most people know there's an importance to music, but they're sort of letting themselves be fed what is good music, or it's like they're not really, thinking for themselves. And then even 50 years ago, because I studied jazz, the taste was so much more sophisticated. And that's not to say that it's not an insult to the modern day music, but it's definitely evident. I mean, there's no question about it, right? It's different. The messages, what becomes successful, it doesn't express the variety of music that's possible. And the average person isn't interested in that. And so that's one of the paradigm shifts that I would love to see happen. And one of the visions that I've had forever since I really, because for me, I gave up piano when I was 12 years old because I was studying with a classical teacher. I would write my own songs and she would basically ignore them. And it just didn't feel, I don't know, I didn't see the value of learning this classical music. And I didn't know any local musicians. The only musicians I knew were like Madonna and Michael Jackson. I had no desire to be either one of them, even though I liked their music. And I continued to sing. I was always in choirs, but I really didn't come back to study music until my early 20s. And it was more from a mental health standpoint. It was like, I can get on Prozac or I can start to be creative. Like I just knew that. I just knew being creative was going to help me to deal, because being in a 9 to 5 job and all that stuff was shocking to my system. I wasn't ready for that. So, I found like I had bouts of depression and like, what's life all about? And this is meaningless. Nobody around me was questioning it. So my music was that place for me. It was my sacred space to come home at night and ask these questions and express these concerns, or express, whatever it was. And from that, it's become even more powerful. For example, I find that lately I'm sort of dealing with some thoughts in my head that are very suspicious thoughts, and they're not in line with reality. And I'm recognizing that, but when they come over me, sometimes they're hard to deal with. It's like, I don't know, is this accurate, or am I being suspicious? So I'm like, okay, I'm going to learn Elvis's song "Suspicious Mind," and I'm going to think about this every time I'm playing it. I'm going to think through this. Like, I want to grow beyond that. Those thoughts are not serving me anymore. It's like a form of clearing out your own head, clearing out your emotions. And you can use your music practice in that way, and that to me is just one of the many ways that music is not being utilized by the average person. And my vision would be that someday we get back to a place where every person knows an instrument. And it doesn't mean they have to be good or talented. And what I found is beyond what is talent, who has talent, who's smart, the people that actually become the people that we're listening to on the radio, they have a certain personality that works with that. It's beyond just talent. You know what I mean? Because there's a lot of talented musicians I know that don't have the personality to do the career the way it needs to be done today. And so to me, it's not the average person, the way they think about it. It's like this elitist idea, like we're only listening to the most talented musicians. And why waste your time if you're not one of those guys? And it's almost like embarrassing if you're somebody who's in a garage band and you've been doing it for years and years. Like, why are you doing this? Why are you spending your time doing this? They just don't get it. And I'd love there to be a paradigm shift on that. And I think the only way possible is for people to actually start playing music themselves again
Well,
and reconnect with it.
when I was in high school, when I first started learning guitar in my freshman year of high school, and like I would attempt to question everybody I knew who could play guitar. And it always came down to, well, if you can play guitar, how come you're working here? How come you're not creating an album? How come you're not doing this? And they go, well, can't I just play guitar for me? Can't I just
Mm,
learn how to do music? I think one of them used the word hobby, but I hate that word.
I
Um,
know.
for the soul, so to speak, for the mental well
Yeah.
being, it seemed more
Yeah.
like that was the common answer. And I'm like, okay. And of course, my younger self didn't get it. I'm like, for me, if you were learning guitar, it's because you were going to start a band and start doing gigs, yo. And it's just, I get it now. Like, I'm 40 and I hear it. And I love that idea, though. Everybody learning some kind of instrument, I think mental health would change significantly across the United States if everybody here had some sort of interest in an instrument of some kind.
I
I
completely
mean,
agree.
it saved me learning guitar.
Yeah.
I was on the path to, I was starting forest fires, breaking into houses, stealing
Wow.
liquor. Guitar saved
Really?
me.
This in your teens, you were all out and about doing that stuff?
I got stories. Well, here's the thing.
Wow.
I don't think I was ever truly bad. Jan jokes about sometimes about how I would break into these summer homes. I grew up in a summer community, but I was a year
Yeah.
rounder, which meant I was working class. But I would break into these summer homes, read their books, just to read their books that they had left behind for the most part. And then later on, I would discover where the liquor was. But initially, it was
Yeah,
to
gotcha.
read books that the library didn't have.
Right.
But
Makes sense
also
to me.
because
Yeah.
there was a little bit of a, I love breaking into people's houses and reading their books. It's so weird.
It is weird. It
That's
is
how I
weird.
read the first Jurassic Park, the second Jurassic Park, the original novels. That's
How
how I discovered Michael
interesting.
Crichton. But yeah, so I guess it was rooted in somebody not wanting to truly be a horrible person. But when you grow
Right.
up in a place like I grew up in, you get bored quick, and being a criminal is very entertaining. But the
It's
guitar substituted most of those desires,
ah,
most of
okay.
those solutions, I should say.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I work with kids a lot, and a lot of the kids that I've worked with, that I was, my like speaking to my strengths, the kids that I would gravitate and sort of they would gravitate to me were the out of the box kids. And a lot of times you do see acting up coming from something that if you're able to really communicate and express and get to the bottom of, it's a acting out because an attention needs to be put there. There's something that needs, guidance from our community, or a lot of kids are acting out not from a place of being just terrible kids or something. It's coming from something that needs to be addressed. They need help with it. I know myself, I had a lot of those things and none of it was addressed, and I really didn't have somebody who cared even about it until I had a professor in college. And he was a French professor, and he connected the dots on how artists actually offered value to society. And the way he did that, I've told this story before. I don't know if I've told you before, but the way he did that, Professor Nodo, he's since passed, and he was at Texas A&M, and he would explain how in any given time period, there was like this going on in France. Like people were worried about, a lot of people were starving. The economy was bad. And then suddenly you had the blue Picasso period. And you had Picasso who was doing all these blue paintings. And you had this artist that was writing these type of poems. And then you had music that sounded this way. And so his point was that artists were and philosophers were the mirror to society. And by that healthy expression, it helped the society to deal with where they were at the time. And I just never understood the value of artists before that. I just thought they were just all in it for themselves and they weren't actually doing a true service. And I guess that's why a lot of people think it's okay that art isn't paid well, or that musicians aren't treated as a real profession. But I think it's been I've heard, and I was part of organizations that talked about musicians being the canary in the coal mine, because I think a lot of jobs are being devalued now, and it's a sign of society not being in a good place. If you don't treat your philosophers and your artists well, it's not a good sign for the society at large. And I think we're seeing that, you know. And in my lifetime, it has been a huge struggle to be a professional musician. It is not easy. And so I think there's a lot of people who would do it if it wasn't that. And I get why they choose not to do it, you know.